Nouns are one of the most important things in a Latin sentence. Nouns, if you remember from your grade school days, are persons, places, or things. And in Latin, the form of that noun is going to tell you what its function is. So if it's in a certain form, if it's in the nominative form, remember the case names, if it's in the nominative form, it's going to be the subject. If it's in the accusative form, it's going to be the direct object, and so on. Now, this lesson is going to cover the first declension nouns. Now, this term declension really just means pattern. Right? And it's the pattern that these particular nouns, these first declension nouns, follow when forming those different cases: the nominative, the genitive, the dative, the accusative, the ablative, and the vocative. So in this lesson, we're going to learn how to form the different forms of first declension nouns. Now, what you need to know is that every noun in Latin is going to have principal parts. We do it in English. If you looked up in a dictionary, it would give you the singular and the plural. Well, in Latin, a dictionary is going to give you the nominative, singular, and not the plural, but the genitive, singular. Okay? Now this genitive singular, and here we have two examples: puella, puellae, which is girl, and poeta, poetae, which is poet. Now this genitive, as I was saying, is very important because in every declension, the genitive is going to tell you, first of all, what declension it belongs to. So this second principal part, since it ends in AE, tells you, this is a first declension. So every noun that has a second principal part that ends in AE will decline this very same way. In a little bit, I will decline puella for you entirely, and then you can see those various forms. But every noun that's in the first declension, every noun that has a genitive in AE will decline this way. The other thing that it tells you is it tells you the stem. So every noun we encounter, right, first this ending is going to tell us what declension it belongs to, and then if we dropped off that ending, it would tell us what the stem is, in this case, puel. So when we form first declension nouns in any of these cases, we're just going to drop off the AE, and we're going to add our endings right onto the stem. So same with poeta, poetae. We knock off the AE, there's our stem. Now, you'll notice at the end of this, so I have puella, puellae, and then I have an F. Now this third principal part, this is the gender. Every noun in Latin has a gender, and there are three genders in Latin. There's masculine, feminine, and neuter. Okay, masculine, feminine, and neuter. In the first declension, you're only going to primarily run into feminine nouns. Okay, so that's what the F stands for here. There are a few select nouns of the first declension that are masculine, poeta being one of them, poet, agricola being another one, farmer. So you do well to memorize all of these principal parts: the nominative, the genitive, and the gender. Okay? So one last little note about principal parts, with first declension especially. You'll notice there's a fairly standard pattern how these end. So for shorthand, you'll oftentimes see the second principal part, puella, just written as AE. Right, so we'll see that AE, that tells you, this is a first declension noun, as I said before, and it will say, and the stem is very standardly built by dropping the A from the first principal part. Okay, so remember those principal parts. They will help you as we move on. Now, how to decline puella, puellae, feminine. Remember, it means girl. All right, so our nominative, remember we have our 5 cases, and we won't include the vocative here. Although the vocative, with the exception of the second declension, is always the same as the nominative. Okay, the vocative is the same as the nominative. So we're just going to focus on these 5 cases here. The nominative, remember that's the subject case, the genitive, possessive, the dative, to or for, the accusative, direct object, and the ablative does a whole bunch of things. It can show the tool by which something is done. It can be used as prepositions. You'll learn these as you go through Latin. So to decline puella, puellae, we're going to take our stem, puella, and the nominative is just a. So puella. The genitive, puellae, we take our stem and add ae. The dative, puellae, add ae. You'll notice the genitive and dative are identical. Context will help you. Context will tell you what makes most sense there. The accusative, puellam, so our stem plus am, and puella. Now this a here is different from the nominative in that in poetry it's going to be long. Some textbooks, some texts will mark that long a and tell you, that is ablative. Some don't. Again, context will help you a lot. So puella, puellae, puellae, puellam, puella. Plural, puellae, ae. Again, context will help you distinguish between the nominative, the genitive, and the dative. Puellarum, puellis, for the dative plural. Puellas, puellis. And notice the dative and ablative are identical. Again, context will help you. So we have these endings a, I, am, is, as, is. And we can just add these to whatever stem we had. If it were poeta, a poet would be our stem. Agricola, agricole would be our stem. And if you're asked ever to decline a noun, what we mean by that is putting that noun in each of these cases. That is, writing out each of these forms. So what I've done here is declined puella. If I were to decline poeta, the stem would be poet in there with these endings. Okay? Now you're going to go on and try some of these, declining some of these nouns on your own. What I would recommend is not only writing them, repetition is the mother of learning, repetitio est mater studiorum, as my old professor used to say, but also say them out loud. That verbal memory is very, very strong. So do these out loud to your roommate, to your parents, to whoever will listen, and the more you practice, the more firm you will be in your ability to decline these nouns. And the same will hold when we go through the other 5 declensions. So this is just the first declension. It's marked, remember, by that ae in the genitive singular. It uses these endings. They're mostly feminine, but there are some masculines. So good luck practicing.